morning. And, we are so happy to have this event for today, local-led research. Because we started thinking about these things, about how to really put research in the hands of local, researchers. Some of them who went to school with us in the northern countries and who have done the justice of returning back to the continent, both Africa and Asia, and spending time to work with issues that the local people are facing. And how do we put that capacity in their hands or resources in their hands to address issues that are pertinent to their people? So we are going to use this event today to talk about it, and we can come up with action plans and visions that will help us to encourage and promote it. So I'm going to start by talking about expanding and promoting local leadership. We have been in so many meetings, and USA have defined local leadership or localization vision, and they define it as the set of internal reforms, actions, and behavior changes that USA is going to undertake to ensure that their work is put local artists in the lead, strengthen local systems, and is responsive to local communities. I think these three things are very, very important to think about when we are talking about localization. Putting local artists in the lead, strengthen local systems, responsive to local communities. In 2018, Magakata is here. Yesterday I heard people mentioning the name Magakata, and I don't want to repeat it, but I have to say it, isn't it? So, Maggie, I'm not repeating your name, I'm just saying your name. Okay. So, Magakata and I invited me, I was on the board of BASIS, I think 2017, to come to Washington in the Reagan building. And the BASIS program have done a lot of work, and they were presenting the results of their work to USA in the Reagan building. And I was sitting down there, and I was listening to the researchers who attend Mozambique subsidy, Malawi subsidy, and I was thinking and I was asking myself, why in the Reagan building? Who cares? If you do subsidy in Africa, who cares? Why don't we do it in Africa? And I've also gone to Mozambique for the same presentation. So after the meeting, I talked to Mike and said, okay, what are we doing here? And we started having conversation and talking about it. And he said, okay, so what do you think? And I said, we need to put local artists in the lead. We need to build local systems. And we need to do research that has meaning to local communities. And graciously, I think 2018, the Market Risk and Resilience Grant were given. And Market partnered with our organization to have local artists. And I think, is it me or the assistant? It's not good, thank you. So, we became the first, I think yesterday when Anne-Sophie was talking, and he was talking about the All-In initiative, that when we put the solicitation that were developed as a joint solicitation development between UC Davis and ICE, International Center for Evaluation and Development, over 165 Africans, teams, not individuals. I think, David, I was talking to you yesterday, not individuals, teams. So I think yesterday you did the math and you said if it is 165 and if each team, right, the PI and the co-PI, it means that we have about 800 people applying for the grant. I said yes. And because of limited resources, we were able to give only 12 out of the 165, to the tune of about 3 million. But when we talk about local leadership, and I have only 10 minutes, and I'm going to use only the 10 minutes to talk about 5 benefits. So each benefit I will use 2 minutes, isn't it? Okay. So the first thing that when you are talking about localization, you have to think about is ownership of research. 2004, I joined MCC as the Director for Monitoring and Evaluation in Washington. And MCC main focus, Millennium Challenge Corporation in Washington, was ownership, country ownership. So we started going to some countries. So I came and I said, guys, do you know what MCC called ownership? They said, what is that? I said, you guys are talking like my children. And they said, what is wrong with your children? I said, anytime my children and their friends are walking and they see my house, it's my house. It's not their house. They tell their friends, this is our house. But the house belongs to me. I pay the mortgage. I pay the bills. I pay everything. They don't pay anything. But they claim that is their house. And at times when we are talking about ownership, that's what we talk, local ownership. We make the local people like my children, isn't it? They don't conceptualize the grants. They don't design the grants. They don't even go to USA to defend the grants. Isn't it? That the USA people here, they don't even come to defend it. They don't negotiate it. They don't sign the agreement. They become local data collectors. But when we are talking about localization, we want the local people to pay the mortgage, to pay the rent, to pay the electricity, to pay for the gas. That is what we call what? Ownership. And that leads me into targeting of local relevant topics and issues. We call this terms in research, we call it research life cycle. I don't call it research life cycle, I call it research value chain. Because I've worked in agriculture, and I like agricultural value chain because it's organic. Life cycle, especially when you are from Ghana and you have done the life cycle of mosquito, you don't want to talk about life cycle because it can give you malaria, isn't it? But when you talk about value chain, it's very, very nice. Value chain is organic. So when you look at research value chain, it's that of conceptualization of the research. What topic are we going to look at it? How is it relevant and how is it relating to issues that we are facing in our own local context? It's not like me sitting down in UC Davis or Wisconsin or Cornell or any place thinking that, let me go and do this research in Africa. So the conceptualization, the research design, how do you do the sampling and the power calculation and all those things are owned by the local people. They sit down and they come up with the research design. Do we use RCT or experimental design or pre and post and all those terminologies, isn't it? They have to come up with it. Then the research goals and the teams, foundation, the research methodology and approach, the research areas and targeting, the policy implication. One of the things I used to work with 3RE, when I moved to Nairobi and joined ABRA, we got a grant from FCDO and Gates Foundation. So we started the first African impact evaluation for 3RE. And when you write a proposal, one of the things that you have to do is define the policy implication. So it's like me doing log frame, those who have used log frame, what are the key assumptions? So local implication becomes something that you add on after you have done. No, what we are talking about is sitting down there and as part of your design, thinking about the policy implication, then the research publication. There's something that I put down here, I think either I miss it, there was a systematic review that was done in 2016 about African researchers as lead authors, and let me go back and see if I can. Okay. Oh, maybe it didn't come to my slide. But a systematic review was done from 2010 to 2016 and on leading medical journals, and it's only 2% having Africans as lead authors of all that. They look at more than about, I don't know where it went, but for the sake of time, I'll go about it. When we talk about local leadership, we are talking about the game plan. Putting the local people to think about the game plan. What is the game plan? What is the goal of the research? Who are the audience? What message that do we want to come after this research? And what is the mode of engagement? So making Africans to think about, or at times we use Africans. Can I say the global south, isn't it? It's all engaging and all compounding, Making researchers from the global south come up with their own game plan. The goal, the audience, the message, and the engagement. When you talk about localization, you are talking about having local role models. You go to African institutions. I've seen Linian here, I've seen Pashua here, I've seen so many African researchers here. Yesterday, Anthony was here. Having these people as a role model so that young researchers can learn from them. If these people have done it, in the all-in grant, yesterday I was talking to David and I was telling him that we give between 400 to 450. He said, what? That is a big money. And I was looking at him and said, but we give grant of $2 million when I was in MCC. Magakata, I think, Nicaragua, how much did we give to you?
Not very much, actually. $500,000.
Yes, $500,000. We give grant of $500,000 to people, 750,000. So if you are giving African researchers, professors, 450,000, it motivates others for them to see that they also can do it. I want to just get, this is what I'm talking about. Lead authors and publishers in hands of research advocates. Who is telling the story in developing countries? Who is telling us what works and what doesn't work? Who is telling us what do we need for our policies and what we don't need? So, who is telling the story? A systematic review of authorship for infectious disease research conducted between 1980 to 2016. The conclusion, you can Google the article, but the conclusion says that African researchers are represented in the first and last authorship position in papers published from research done in Africa. That is very sad. Not papers done in any place in their own context. This calls for greater investment in capacity building, equitable research partnership at every level of the global health community. And applies to every community. The social science, the horticulture community, isn't it? It applies to them. Promoting localization, encouraging the North-South, collaboration and the South-South. When I was a young guy, there was a scholar, the first PhD person from Ghana. We call him Dr. Abu. And he gave an analogy that I've used. He said, and I love playing piano, and he said, you cannot make a melody by playing only one set of the keys on the piano. You cannot play only the white keys or the black keys to make a melody, isn't it? For you to make a music for people to dance, which I don't like dancing, you have to play both the white and black keys, isn't it? So by combining the black and the white keys, you can make a good melody. So By promoting localization, you facilitate north-south, south-southward collaboration, which is really, really important if we are going to build a good, and that is what RE is doing. And lastly, empowering of individuals to pursue their own life choices, optimized in a given context. You know, giving people opportunity to lead their own destiny is something that you cannot take for granted. The principle of empowerment is something that you cannot take for granted. You know, I always tell people, one of the things that studying in US have helped me is that this short Africa 5'4" person can stand in front of everybody and say my mind. It's an empowerment, isn't it? It's an empowerment that by promoting localization, you know, you give people optimal, you know, opportunity to shape something in their own context. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. That was an excellent presentation and really gets to the heart of the matter about what we're going to be talking about today. David's going to be co-hosting this with me, so he'll be around, and definitely please save your questions. We'll be hearing from a panel shortly after my presentation here from an innovation lab management entity's perspective. We'll be able to open it up for discussion quite a bit. While my presentation comes up, I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall benefits of local-led research from a management entity perspective. And it, of course, as you might imagine, overlaps a bit with David as our very strong partner, some of their benefits as well. And I'll go over a local-led challenge and opportunity survey that the Innovation Labs did through the local capacity building affinity group, and so I'll share those results with you that I think are quite interesting and will give us fodder for the conversation. And then I'll go over our agenda for today. So, local-led research, how it can benefit development, adapting policies and programs to foster locally led development that is tied to each country's unique conditions is key to effective development. And David already showed this project lifecycle research value chain, and in every step of the way, of course, bringing in local leadership is really important, which we heard again and again over the past 2 days. So I already went over this agenda. I'll also talk about entry points, that particularly from a USAID perspective. So why should we do local-led research? It's more effective in many ways. We are able to generate context-specific solutions, so we have, in my opinion, more appropriate challenge and solution sets. We're able to better identify the challenge and, as a result, create a more appropriate solution. And as a result, you have faster response times, increased relevance, and you're also able to include local knowledge. So we heard from quite a few of the panels over the past 2 days that including local knowledge is critical when you want to bring up certain populations and ensure that they're able to reap the benefits of your interventions. And it's really hard to get that kind of granular, disaggregated data sitting in California. Faster response times from the management entity is critical. So in the past, when I first started the Horticulture Innovation Lab, I'll pick on ourselves, we reported, quarterly, we checked in with our project PIs who were based at US universities, and then they would check in with their project PIs that were in whichever country would be the future country. And then it would take a month or 2 months for us to really get feedback and make any adjustment. And that's when we, then had to talk to USAID to move around budgets. When you're able to contract directly with those in country on your research projects and have the leaders in country, they're able to make those decisions and adjustments in real time and update you on them. You really have to be moving that structural leadership to the field. And I've already touched on this increased relevance. I also think that by bringing in leadership from the regions, you have increased scalability. Partly from what I've already talked about, you have more appropriate challenge and solution sets, but you also have leadership and community buy-in. You have your research programs, just as David said, the design is built in the community, and as a result, the results that come in are going to be much more applicable and be able to apply much more quickly. And the mechanism of that result delivery is much more likely to be effective within that community contextual landscape. And just as I'm saying, you're responsive to cultural, geographic, and infrastructure parameters. Again, when we design research at the Horticulture Innovation Lab, we don't have a good understanding of what is the infrastructure availability, the cultural availability, or the geographic landscape. So when you're able to bring in researchers in that region, they're able to create a design that is already responding to these parameters. And if you ignore the parameters, no matter how good your science is, you're not going to have a usable solution. So finally, not only is local-led research help us be more rigorous and effective in our science results and delivery, but it also is helping us get towards our outcomes that we're all trying to achieve through the Sustainable Development Goals, through socioeconomic development. David talked about this. We're building a healthy academic ecosystem. We're bringing in jobs. We're making these dollars really count within the community instead of putting those dollars through U.S.-based universities and only through U.S.-based universities. And as David mentioned, bringing those dollars only in data collection. What we really want to do is be creating long-term, sustainable financial investment within these communities that results in a more healthy, robust economic development and job opportunity. And finally, something that I don't think we talk a lot about, and David certainly touched upon, is this richer global dialogue. We talk a lot about regional expertise for regional application. That regional expertise can be fed back into global conversations that we're having about the Sustainable Development Goals in order to really understand these challenges in a much more developed way. So I think it really goes north-north, south-south, south-north, north back to south. And the other thing I will say, which I was talking to David about, is that the project lifecycle does make a big difference too. So our projects end, but the in-country partners don't. So they really are able to take this forward. So considering those benefits, we do, I think, as a community, want to operationalize this. And USAID has put a lot of thought into how to do this through their local-led vision. And so it provides us some entry points in how to do this as an Innovation Lab community. First, USAID has talked about adapting policies and programs to foster locally led development that is tied to each country's unique political, social, cultural, economic, and environmental conditions. They talked about shifting power to local actors, and truly shifting that power, not just in an artificial way, but being able to set the agenda, priority setting, control the money. And that's the third point, increased funding for local partners, and then global advocacy for local-led development. So doing events like this certainly fits into that. We're able to keep bringing up the message about why this is important, why this is rigorous and effective science. So as we go into our conversations today, these are 4 points that I want you to keep in mind. And I'll talk specifically about some administrative entry points for the innovation labs. But first, given that we have had a chance to talk to innovation labs very specifically about what they would like in terms of an opportunities within local-led research, but also what their challenges are. You know, this is an incredible vision, but I think we're all working as a community to underscore it and actually operationalize it. So it's good that we have that out there, but now we have to realign our systems in order to actually support it and incentivize it. So these are some of the challenges that we face, but also some of the opportunities. So the survey we did was a part of the local capacity strengthening affinity group. The purpose was to understand the top constraints development practitioners face in implementing locally led development. What did it include? Top 3 issues survey participants face in implementing local led development, how they dealt with these issues, and what are some of the best practices moving forward. And 14 innovation labs took it and 17 local organizations. So some of the top constraints that were brought up from the management entities, absolutely, which I'm sure we'll hear a ton about today, was institutional and contracting issues. This is multi-layered, multifaceted. Can't wait to get into it. In this nexus here, local organizations and management entities equally identified limited in-country training and limited infrastructure. And the in-country training really spans long-term training, but then also administrative training. You know, the innovation lab management entities, for better or worse, are trained very deeply in a lot of USAID's administrative processes. And to manage these contracts, you need to have that experience. And so that is a huge gap when we think about giving local organizations this type of funding. And then finally, local organizations, largest challenges around beneficiaries hesitant to participate and adopt, which I thought was interesting. So one thing that we know that is really important in local-led development, and you're thinking about application of your innovations, is that people have different opinions depending on where they're sitting. So we disaggregated the data, these data on major constraints by, as I showed earlier, local organizations and management entities. And this goes to show that you really need to disaggregate because the opinions really are different. The challenges that each person faces, whether you're coming from a local perspective or a management perspective, is very different. So here you can see the data I showed in the last slide, a little bit more disaggregated. But the blue is the management entity and the red is the local organization. And so you can see what a huge challenge contracting is for management entities. But then you can see the real difference in responses in terms of beneficiary hesitant to participate and adopt, and challenges with infrastructure, climate, and topography. And we did talk a little bit in the past few days about resilience and how infrastructure, climate, topography, these really play a role in significant parameters and how your innovation is going to be affected and used within a landscape. So just some takeaways from the survey, because I do want to get to our panel. So from the management entity side, strengthen the capacity of local organizations through providing the resources and funding necessary for them to achieve their vision. So again, it's supporting their vision, not necessarily including them in your research design. And then from the local organization's perspective, their feedback was really about directly involving all stakeholders, including local government and farmers cooperative, in every stage of the project life cycle. We've heard that quite a bit. So just briefly, the Horticulture Innovation Lab, and this is really just to get us all thinking. If you want to ask me more about our process, I'll be here, obviously, all week. But just to get you thinking on how you can operationalize some of this stuff. So when we were funded in 2019, we decided to take a locally led, globally supported approach, where we were really hoping to create a new type of system where the regions were front and center in establishing the priorities, who got funded, and then managing those funds. So to do that, we worked with a number of organizations. David is our lead here in Kenya. But we put together workshops in each of the 4 regions that we work, and chose an organization that led those workshops. And they did primary research, and then they were able to establish through those workshops, data collection, focus groups, what the main priorities within that community would be for that region. The other cool thing we did, in my opinion, is develop an archetype. So when we did these regional workshops, there was 15 priorities that might have come out, in 3 major categories. And so we needed to come up with a way to prioritize that research. And so each region developed an archetype of a person that they wanted to serve in that community. So it gets to this social differentiation piece. So, for instance, David, who is the person that you all decided to work with in Kenya? Mogere, yeah, we gave them a name. I think it was a woman who had 2 children, but a very specific identity that we could then look at the research.
36 years old.
40 to 60?
34 to 36 years old.
Yeah, 24 to 36 years old. So youth. And so we wanted our research to basically serve this person. And we got the idea from the Uganda mission. I'm not sure if you've heard of what they did, but they wanted their entire research portfolio to serve the 14-year-old girl in Uganda. And so we copied that, essentially, and each region came up with the same archetype, and that's how we then went through a prioritization process of what we were going to focus on for the next 4 years. So, and so we put the priorities together, the RFPs went out, and a major change for us is that we are only funding PIs within the region. So all of our projects have now been awarded, and they're all led by in-country PIs. And we talk a lot about capacity strengthening and how important that is. These are our projects within the countries that we work, but I just want to push back on that a little bit. We got 140 proposals from around the world that answered these RFPs, and those proposals were incredibly strong. We weren't able to fund them all, of course. We were only able to fund 12, but we left a ton of amazing proposals on the shelf. There is so much interest and so much ability for people to lead in country, and we can contract directly with these researchers. So it was just went to show how ready this community is to take these dollars and lead this research. So finally, I'll leave you with essentially this point, moving the conversation away from just capacity strengthening. It's more about providing resources, partnership, trust, and regional expertise to perform impactful research. And I would say the space, we need to be able to make a space for these leaders to come up. So just some leverage points for us to consider programmatically, the content of our projects, how do we want to design our projects, what is it that we want to focus on, administrative, how do we administer our projects, which I'm sure will come up quite a bit, organizationally, how are we going to shift our organizational culture to bring in local-led leadership, and then institutionally, social and legal norms, what assumptions are we operating under? So, that brings us to our goal for the day. We want to begin to develop a common understanding of a shared vision for local-led research. And we want to identify entry points and action items to operationalize this goal. So to do that, we will hear from other innovation labs and their partners and encourage a plenary discussion. I know we have a lot of USAID in the room, and we really encourage you. We don't have you on a panel, but we really love this being an interactive plenary session. And then we will have breakout groups to discuss the vision and how to get there, and discuss next steps to formalize our vision and submit recommendations. So we have a really packed agenda for the morning. I just want to let you know we don't have a formal break, but because we will be up and around in our breakout groups, there will be coffee served all day, so just go get coffee or a snack whenever you want. And otherwise, I don't think there's any other logistics, and I'd like to invite First David Shirley up, who's going to give us a little bit more background on USAID's vision and the Policy Innovation Lab, and then we'll have a panel as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, also waiting for that to come up. So I'm really, really happy to be able to be here and talk about this topic. Thank you. I don't know how many of you, are you hearing me okay? No?
It's in PowerPoint, yeah.
Let me get my computers, or I at least have the PowerPoint. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Okay, I may have to stand at the custodian. So I don't know how many of you remember USAID Forward. right? Which was maybe, I think you'll still be able to hear my voice, 12, 15 years ago, right? Where USAID had big goals to start funding local organizations and working in this way, right? And we heard a lot about it for 2 years. This is my memory, okay? 2 years, 3 years. You just didn't hear anything more about it after a while. I think USAID was unrealistic about its own culture, right? They're unrealistic about capacity at the time in the field. And I think since that time, AID has learned a lot. I know the capacity in the field has increased tremendously, right? Last 15, 20 years, so much more capacity out there. And I think there has also been a cultural shift, I would say, in, I gotta get this going, among partners, right? Where just the realization of the importance of these kinds of topics has really gone up, right? And openness to it. And just realizing that, as I'll say in one of these slides, there's really no other option if we want to get lasting, sustained change. There's no other way to work, really. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is localization, so I don't want to repeat too much, but sometimes sharing things a couple times in different ways helps. Why, so some of that will be a bit repetitive. And then the how, taking PRCI as one example. It's an example we love because we've loved doing it, but we know it's imperfect. We're not claiming that the PRCI Innovation Lab is perfect in this, but we learned a lot in how we went about doing it, so I wanted to share a bit with you. So again, you know, localization is not just about moving resources out to local partners, although that is crucial. We must move resources out to local partners, which means in the end, some fewer resources for us sitting in the US, right? And we've got to adjust to that. But it's more fundamentally about leadership, that David and that Aaron was talking about. Leadership in defining the issues, leadership in defining how to go about looking at them, leadership in the ability and how to convey those to policymakers, right? How to go about all of this. So really being at the table from the beginning and having an equal voice. That's really what it's about. So it's about some of us who kind of unconsciously have been accustomed to controlling the agenda, right? I was accustomed to controlling the agenda for a long time, right? It's about us learning to work in a different way. Okay. And you know, the localization vision, you referred to that, and you said what a great document it is. It really is. If you read the USAID localization vision, there's a lot of thought that went into that. There's so many statements in there that really resonate. So it's just one of the things it says is that development agencies such as USAID cannot on their own drive lasting changes in the places they work. Instead, our role is to support and catalyze local change and processes. So we just have to think about ourselves, right? We are more creative and we do work that matters, you know, when we know that our voice matters, right? We have human beings have an ability to believe in ideas and a need to believe in ideas. And if we're empowered to pursue those ideas, we do work that matters. If we can't pursue those ideas, we're not going to do work that matters nearly as much. So it's just, and we're also much more willing to learn what we don't know when what we do know is recognized, right? So same for us, same for everybody everywhere. Okay, so I took a few selected USAID principles from the localization vision and from the local capacity strengthening strategies that the agency put together. So one of them is to start with the local system, right? But I would say it's more than that. You know, it's starting with the local vision, and that was already mentioned. Priorities, values, capacity, knowledge, structures, systems, looking at all of this and starting right there and then building on those. Another principle is embedding flexibility to do that under PRCI. Strengthen diverse capacities through diverse approaches. I'll speak briefly to that. And practice mutual accountability. Okay. So how did we go about eliciting the vision? Well, first of all, so we're not a management entity. I think maybe we might be the only innovation lab that's not a management entity. We're a consortium, right? So one member of our consortium at the very beginning was Renapri, now Anapri. You heard Anthony Chapoto speak yesterday, right? So they were at the table with us, with Cornell, with IFPRI, putting forth their vision, defending, the amount of resources they needed to be able to pursue that, and kind of pulling us along and seeing what their vision was and the need to invest in that. So that was the first thing. The second thing is that we then put out competitive grant proposals, not for research teams. We eventually did that, but initially we did it for centers, right? And we asked the centers to do three things, right? First of all, what is your vision of where you want your center to be in 5 years? What's your vision? Second of all, we wanted to see if they could assess their own strengths and weaknesses in achieving that vision. So what's your own diagnosis of your strengths and weaknesses to reach that vision? And then propose to us, your plan for reaching that vision, right? And we received about 35 proposals from across Africa. We ended up funding 3, okay? We would love to have funded more. We ended up funding 3, but that commitment then was a 5-year commitment to work with these centers, okay? We got great proposals, and I think starting it that way with what is your vision and how do you think you can get there. Not that that was the final word in terms of how to get there. We then worked with them, right, on this, but we absolutely started with their vision, and that was just fundamental. So once the centers were selected, and I don't know if John Mietendorf is in the audience here. John Mietendorf, yes, was sat down with us from the very beginning, conceiving how to go about this institutional capacity strengthening, right? So it was called PICA for policy, influence, capacity. Exactly, that's right. Anyway, we sat down and we worked in a very intensive way. John initially with Kate, and eventually John Manel with Kate, worked very intensively with the centers to revise their plan through intensive regular interaction, right? And then periodic check-ins to manage that plan, right? And we thought maybe, is this a little condescending? Is it too much? Are we too much on top of this? But the centers have unanimously given us feedback that the intensive initial work with them to revise and put strategic plans in place, and then the regular follow-ups has been really critical to helping their leadership change the culture of their own organizations, right, and really pursue this. Okay. We then provided $300,000 grants, not a ton of money, but $300,000 grants against the strategic plan, against the vision, not against particular deliverables. So this was flexible money, right? They could end up changing the details of how they spent the money, and then in the end, that flexibility was, in all the feedback that we've gotten from them, again, was just enormously useful. Just think about how much we value core funding, where we've got the flexibility to move it here and to move it there, and these organizations typically have not had that. So it's super, super important. We also made a major grant to Renapri, and that was core funding in the same way. What they ended up doing with that money was not exactly what we talked about at the beginning, right? It evolved, we worked with them, we were very flexible, they were flexible to respond to needs. Okay, I won't worry about that right now. So we use many different approaches in trying to build capacity. We had a number of individual approaches in terms of mentored research with Cornell through the STARS Plus program, which is a competitive program, then a less competitive program focused on the centers that we've given grants to, in all cases mentored research. We also did special research grants for topics that came up and looked worth investing in. We had a very ambitious core center technical training program, which ended up being very popular, and other things. And then the institutional strengthening, and eventually leadership. If any of you have heard of the Leadership Practices Inventory, okay, which is a leadership practices inventory, which is an approach to
identifying the characteristics that make good leaders, right? And then working with the centers. I went through it, and we had other leaders within PRCI at the centers go through it, and the centers have found that very useful. So a number of these things were not things that we originally conceived in the proposal. They came up and seemed relevant to do. We discussed it with all of the centers and then moved forward. Okay. Well, I don't know if I'm going on too long here. Okay. Mutual accountability. Now I'm going to come back in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of the approach. You know, this is so important, and frankly, I think it's very hard to do well, right? You really have to be committed to it. You have to embed it structurally in what you do. You know, I think the pandemic made it a bit more. We had it structurally embedded. The pandemic made it a bit harder for us to do it. There's a lot of time adjusting to that and bringing on new programs and so forth. The ability to meet in the annual convenings, you know, that we had, but you know, those are close to being excuses. In the next iteration, we need to be much more purposeful and structural and procedural about this mutual accountability. Right? There's a lot of it, but I think we can do better. We did do a lot of listening to our centers with informal surveys and informal learning. Okay.
Very applicable for the work we do at the Innovation Labs. We also have Lillian Kirimi. She is a Senior Research Fellow at the Tegemeo Institute of Agricultural Policy and Development at Egerton University in Nairobi, Kenya. She is the principal investigator of the All In initiative that we heard some in the past couple of days. And this is an initiative, there's a partnership between the International Center for Evaluation and Development and the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Markets, Risk, and Resilience. Thank you so much for being here. So we wanted to have a little bit of rules, but we really want to hear from them, but hopefully also hear from you. I'm going to start with launching a question, and I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes for you to provide the answer, and then open for the discussion with between yourselves and the public. So the first question is, it's in your agenda, the agenda that Erin sent this morning. But what are the administrative barriers do the Innovation Labs face with USAID, with academia, with local partners? So this is going to be really helpful to start understanding those challenges and then also start thinking about the solutions. So Saskia, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. It's always very easy to start complaining about someone else. But I think, you know, I also, you know, want to start with looking at universities in the US. And I also, in preparation for this session, consulted with colleagues at UF. And I think many of the universities are very familiar with NSF, NIH, USDA. USAID is a bit of a different beast. Not many universities are really very comfortable applying, you know, even if it's federal funding, it is still, there's still some reluctance. And as much as this applies to US universities interested in maybe applying, becoming a management entity for an innovation lab, there's also that same perhaps reluctancy at other institutions in the US that are considering applying when we put out RFAs. But certainly also, you know, there's other institutions in country may not be as familiar with the requirements. And I won't go into, I mean, I just want to say that we are lucky as Livestock Systems Innovation Lab, we are in a second phase. So we have been able to learn a lot from the first phase. And, you know, we also have done things differently on the experience in phase 1. And we continue learning and adapting as much as possible. So, I just want to leave it here. I know you gave us 5 minutes, but I really, you know, want to pass it on.
Thank you.
Is WSU is able to get money from USAID or to do work and then get funded? That doesn't work with. You don't have a pot of money where you can do the work and then get results. So to employ, you, for instance, need to show that you have got the money in the account so that they can give the contract workers. That area is huge. The university has to find a way of affording a proportion of the money ahead of starting the work. That's not cheap. It just makes it really difficult for the local partner to do the work for the money. The second thing I'd like to say is I think it's important to realize just like there's such a need among universities in the US, it's similar here. Institutions, they're so different. It seems to always boil down to leadership, who is the person responsible for making that decision, and if they understand what it is that we are trying to do. So I find, for instance, working with the embedded objectivity as seamless as working with students, institution like ILRI. Because the principal investigator at the embedded objectivity is able to get to management and say this contract needs to be signed within 5 weeks, and they're able to respond. I don't think that's a system issue. I'd say it's a leadership issue. So for us to sort of make progress by feeding some of the barriers we overcome is to also identify institutions and persons that are able to take this kind of decisions faster and work with them to improve the system. And then from the side of an innovation lab, to work with our management, understand that the way the American university works may not just be easy to transfer it to all of the institutions.
Thank you, Kimbi. Anything else that you want to add before I jump to the public? Any of the panelists? Okay, maybe this is the time for you to engage in. I'm going to direct questions now to you. And what do you think maybe additional barriers, administrative barriers of the innovation lab space when working with local partners? And I would like to hear from the public. Who is the brave person? Please.
Thank you. And thank you, Erin, and great presentations earlier in the panel. And everything that has been said so far, definitely in agreement with that, especially with some of the structural pieces. But one, I know it came out of the survey, but one thing that I think in this community that is really challenging is our local partners being tapped for many different projects, different innovation labs, different development projects. I can think of several examples. One in Cambodia, they're doing fantastic. They're an excellent example of the local led research or development from the beginning and their transformation over time. Just amazing. But they still, there's a lot of burden it's not burden, it's just a lot of projects for the same people. And then on a, not on an extreme basis is Haiti, where there's so many, and they've got lots of other issues that I think it's really important for us, for all these countries with constraints. Obviously, Haiti is an extreme example, but then the strongest university gets USAID attention and gets the majority of the projects through them because that's the safe place, or in a safe sense, not safely safe, but that their structure is set up that they can receive money. And so it's just a huge challenge because you want to be able to build capacity beyond just one or two institutions.
Thank you.
Gina? Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
So I was also wanted to add one thing that just kind of brings the issue in the front is that all the colleagues we work with in Eastern Southern African countries and also West Africa, universities here, and this is sort of adding to Poli's point, are institutions that have a different, it's not a different mandate, but their primary purpose is education and teaching. And the folks that I have worked with over the past 10 to 15 years are primarily first teachers. Their workload is huge. Their course load is huge. And so within that context, they have to figure out how to apply for research grants and then lead those research grants becomes a big challenge for them. And this is not me talking, this is colleagues that I have worked with for over these years who have always said, it's not that we are not interested or we don't have capacity. The problem is we do not have the time. And that, I think, is linking to a little bit of Poli's point of institutional leadership and how institutions perceive and what the role of the individual within the institution.
Thank you. Please.
Hi.
I just wanted to bring up the point that
I've seen some of our local organizations, in a few cases, it's challenging for them to advocate for on their programs. Receiving the money from the institution is less of a problem, but then sending some of that money off to another institution, particularly if it's going outside the country, has been a challenge in some cases. And I think it might be government regulation or it could be other reasons.
Thanks for calling me too. So I think what made the PICA process so successful was that it was a process of self-determination. We didn't go into the institution saying these are the results that we want you to achieve. We started with asking them to analyze their own institution and their own environment and to decide what influence they wanted to have in their ecosystem. And then we, together with them, identified the tools that they needed in order to be able to do that. I think that probably is the key to respecting our local partners, allowing them to determine what kind of impact they're going to have on their context, rather than coming in and saying, this is what we want you to do. So I think if we take those approaches, and we have the advantage that we work with, including the ones that we're part of in the US, want to be better institutions. And so I think facilitating that process in some way is a form of respect for them as local institutions, as long as we allow them to be the leading voice in determining what kind of impact they want to have, and then also the tools that they need in order to achieve that impact.
Let me add something to this that the all-in grant have done. And I think UC David has that confidence in a local institution like ICE to be grant managers. So we have three types of grants. We have universities and institutions like Mogere with years of experience, and have UEI and all those things who get their grant directly sent to them annually. And then they report. We have financial team members who do it. We have emerging institutions that we have done due diligence, and we think that they have capacity, but they haven't worked with USA for a long time. So we manage those grants. We give them quarterly and semi-annual disbursement. They submit their report, we investigate, we look at it, and then we transfer. Then we have about 3 or 4 of them. They don't have any experience at all. So their grants are managed by us, our institution. So what we do is more of giving them advance, and then we do disbursement maybe monthly and other things. It puts a lot of effort, but the aim is to build their capacity. So we are building the university capacity there. We have employer accountants that we use the overhead to pay, and we are building their capacity. We are hoping that within 3-4 years, the institutions will be able to self-manage that. And so you have to identify the categories through their intelligence and design the program accordingly. At times it's burden on us, but I was telling my professor yesterday that our finance team capacity are built, and they can handle all those things. They have gone through all the USA training. They know that every training that we can get for them, so that they can manage the US government grants as any US university will be able to manage it. So that is something that we have been able to build in Nairobi to manage multiple grants. We are managing about 20 grants currently, and they are managing all the financial transfers and everything in accordance with USA.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the engagement from the public. And it seems that we're moving to the second question. Yes.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, sorry. One more sort of administrative side. First, statement. We've also USA Agency talked about climate this week. We've also signed on something called the local land adaptation rules. We'd love folks to check out the adaptation. And then secondly, in the development, I really appreciate the summary of how USA is looking at localization. There's been some really neat thought by our PBL bureau, Policy Bureau, and they have been trying to figure out how to look at who's figured out how to go risk, and looking at what are the best practices globally on risk. And would love to hear if there are some of our partners have, like, what lessons do we have from other donors? The administrator for that bureau is constantly asking, who's figured this out, right? And so it's great to hear examples if there's other donors who are doing this right. The huge caveat that we have our own policies we need to follow, but if there's been some successful examples, it would be great to hear, again, not just from European donor, but what learning can we have from other partnerships? Again, with a great caveat, we have a real special advantage.
Thank you so much, and I think it's great because I think that helps us. That is the perfect framework for our next session. And it is how can USA, the innovation labs, and regional partners work together to make these new systems that uphold and promote local-led development and research. And of course, all builds in lessons learned, identification of best practices, and how we can take those lessons learned and start applying it for our own work. So I'm going to give that question to the panel, and maybe this time I'm going to start with Dombi. You have that like mix of like U.S. institution and local institution, so that might be a good place to start. And we come this way. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I want to respond some of the comments. So I agree. A lot of my institutions are set up here as universities, and that is not a static position. It's changing. So, for instance, there was some reforms that were done in the Education where they separated teaching departments and provided avenues for research through research institutions. The trickiest part, as somebody who studied elsewhere came back of becoming a researcher was protecting my time towards I did not have 100 students every day in front of me. And part of that requires that institutions create research positions. I think many of the universities and research institutions are beginning to do that. What does it require to do? You might say government should put money. It's not going to happen as planned because the mandate of the current government is to service students. And research is still required to be done. Maybe this is right to ask about the aspect. What can I feel you've got an innovation lab and you can protect time for people that you're working with. Give them pay the time for So as they are spending 40-80% of their time on research and buying time to the partner, while we don't have that practice. That, in my view, critical. The other part I feel like the really good discussion. What does it take to have a management system that can run the country? My value is you have got a whole part. You've got people that who can free grants, who have helped you when the grants are awarded. What we have, I should already say, you have one research office with 1,000 professors. Even if you have a grant of $10,000 or $1 million, and how do you support that office? Is through overhead. How much are overhead that you give local partner? 10%. How much do I get as an WSU? I get 6% at least. And WSU is able to do that because I think they have to money. On the side of the local institution, they have only 10%. And that is not sufficient for them to be able to do work. So maybe one of the other problems is make sure you want to support a local institution, also do good money, be the employee, grant manager, and allow them time. The idea, for instance, of full-time equivalence is a fantastic idea on WSU. It's not as easy when they come to the problem because people are not employed from different courses. But if you say I have maybe 0.1 FTE to support your research, essentially that person can only add up the salary of an existing but they cannot bring in new hands. Maybe these are a lot of important things to think about.
Thank you so much. And yeah, when you reflect, bring the question again, like what can we do, and just bring again that question. If you have experiences of other donors or best practices that you can share with us, that'll be wonderful. Thank you. Please, Lillian, go ahead.
Okay. I think I want to start from where he stopped. I think it's very important that as we go forward, we are not just putting in funds to strengthen research capacity. We may have very good capacity in terms of research, but if you have weak governance systems, especially in the university sector or institutions, then it means that the funds you have given researchers will not be used as effectively. I talked before about the turnaround time, even getting those resources from the system. The resources are there sitting in the bank. Getting that to go to the field can take a whole lot of time. So I think it's more shifting towards institutional strengthening. So that you're putting research money where you have strong institutions. You talked about a grant management office. So you have people to assist you walk through that whole grant process. And that's very important. Strengthening those systems, I think will help the researchers bank the resources, time, and get what they need to deliver on time. And I think effectively then we'll have greater value for the money invested, but even greater capacity for the institutions to attract more funding. If you have a system that's working well, then you can easily attract funding from other institutions. I think that's very important. Secondly, I'd want to say that apart from just drawing resources from USAID, you've asked about what regional partners can do. I think we can expand opportunities so that the funding goes beyond what we get through USAID. Bring in other partners who can leverage on what USAID is already doing.
There's quite a lot that has gone into different institutions. If I take my institution as an example, we've been funded by USAID for over 20 years. That helped build capacity. And through the process, working with USAID was engaging us and encouraging us to diversify our resource base. We've been able to attract other partners, leveraging on that resource. So I think it's important that innovation labs think through how we can bring on additional partners to bring in funding to promote that partnership. I think that partnership will be great for sustainability. So that when an innovation lab funding ceases, the institutions or the researchers that have been working with the innovation labs are able to continue with the research or with the activities. But I also want to mention that it's important to have continuity in support. So think about medium to long-term support for institutions. If I speak about PRCI, I think we enjoyed the model under PRCI and mentioned some of the institutions that Dave Shani mentioned earlier. The ability to have the institutions think outside the box, so to speak. So maybe I'm putting 2 points together about continuity and flexibility. Maybe start with flexibility and then we can wind up with the continuity issue. The flexibility has been critical for some of the institutions under PRCI. Allowing the institution to have their vision, to think through what they want, to take leadership in defining the problems and the solutions and how they want to organize themselves. I think one of the key examples we learned from this process is that an institution in Nigeria was provided with funding, but they realized what they needed to do could not be housed in the existing institution. And their funding allowed them to start a new institution that would respond to the issues that were of interest to the researchers of the centers. Yeah, David mentioned that you're working through centers. So a new center is in place but has been able to do more things because of the flexibility in funding. I think we have also experienced the same and all in. One of the projects Mogere has is on soil management and testing of soils and giving recommendations to the farmers to be able to improve the health of their soils. That grant, because we had a proposal and objectives in it, but we've been allowed to adjust it to be able to meet the needs of the stakeholders we are working with. We are engaging with 4 counties, and because of the flexibility in that grant, we've been able to sit with the county governments and agree with them what the issue is. Do they see the issue of soil health the way we do? So we discussed with them, agreed that it's important to test the soils and give the results back to the farmers so that they can act on the information, and maybe that can help deal with one of the constraints they face in terms of promoting the health of the soil. So I think that flexibility is very, very important. And as an institution that has also received funding from USAID for a long time, and our project called TAPRA, we were able to do a lot more because we had a grant that was focused on policy research institute. So we had an opportunity to respond very quickly to emerging issues in terms of providing evidence to government related to policy issues. So that flexibility allowed us to do a lot more, and I think that is critical. But finally, I would just want to go back to the question of continuity. So having an institution that has not just the funding, but the capacity built through engagement with partners in the north, I think it's important. But the long-term sustainability of that institution is the research program is important. So I think thinking through funding beyond maybe 3 years, 5 years will help to ensure that we have sustainability, but also that we deepen the capacity that we have built within 3 or 5 years. Maybe let me take it.
Thank you, Lillian. Saskia, please.
Yes,
I love the idea of flexibility. And again, I think of my own institution, lots of things we could do differently and better. Again, I want to start with reflect on our own institution. And I mentioned we are looking to be in a second phase. So in preparation for before we launched, the first RFA, we actually had 3 RFA webinars where we kind of explained. This was particularly aimed to people that have organizations that had not worked with us. We also had one specifically targeted minority serving institutions. So we really want to kind of demystify some of the things around applying for the USA from the project. And we also went into the details, so we developed these webinars and they were integral part of that with our national programs and also contract grants to really explain, once you are awarded, this is what we will be expecting from you in terms of the financial reporting. These webinars, the feedback was very positive. We also had them posted on the website. That's only one part, but we tried again, learning from mistakes and learning from phase 1. I think the other way that we are working with our institution is, of course, we really have once we receive financial reporting of reports, we really work closely with them and go into, especially for the first financial reports, to really explain what is allowed. Again, we go through that whole exercise again. I want to touch also what my colleagues have said in terms of institutional strengthening. So I know many of our innovation labs actually work, and we often work, again, as Jan also said, we work with the same institutions. So I think of West Africa, many of us work with Inera, and so the Livestock Systems Innovation Lab has sent people there to work with their accountants and finance team, but I know other innovation labs have done too. So that's one part, and we also as innovation labs recently got together as there's some associate directors and also the finance officers to really say, okay, we're all supposedly the same, but we're not. So how can we also streamline again, especially thinking of the in-country partners, all our funding comes from the same source, so we should, even if we have particularities, because we are with different universities, probably 80%, 90% is the same. So can we maybe think of also using the same template? So we are sharing also at that level. I want you to be aware of that because I think it's important that, this is not a one-off, we are really constantly looking. But I think what also is a reality, especially from the past 2-3 years, is that innovation labs have suffered from staff turnover, but certainly also our in-country partners. So we train people, and then people move on. Absolutely, that's just life. But that is really, and I'm really fantastic that the University of Nairobi has actually a research office, but that's not a given for many organizations that we work with. So actually PIs are able to submit a proposal with a budget that maybe he or she has developed themselves and with no input, and that's then where capacities really vary, and but I think we are as innovation lab well positioned, we already, that's part of our mandate. We want to work. We have this international team. So in terms of how USA can support, I think it's not only about the money, but I think, as I explained, many of these separate innovation labs are working and are sending people over to train. So is that best use of resources? Can USA training models exist? Is there something perhaps at that level that USA could support more? I want to
one last comment here is about this, what do other donors differently? And again, we as Innovation Lab Systems get about 10 million from the Development and Gates Foundation. Now, I understand this is a very different beast. This is not, but I just want to explain that. And again, this is not something that you can probably help with, but just for us as management entity, the stress we go through every year in terms of when do we get our funding. I think it's May we haven't received our funding. Now this year I'm relaxed, but last year I was not relaxed. Yeah. So that is really always and with the Gates Foundation I fully understand it's a very different setup. But take the money up front, then you are allowed to accrue interest, and you can use that money. So that is an annual reporting and what it's extremely different. So it's just that we are working with these two donor organizations, but it's a very sharp contrast. I'm from Europe, and I cannot comment on European funding, as an innovation lab. So I want to share.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia. And I'm hearing a lot of adaptive management. There's like a lot of message for you to say. How we really learn from what has happened, take that experiences, develop, identify the lessons, and then build on what are the best practices. So thank you all so much for sharing. And we don't have much time, but I wanted to bring this last question. And it's why are the innovation labs uniquely positioned to lead the way? And this time I wanted to start with Lillian. Please, if you can kick us off on that question. Why the innovation labs are uniquely positioned to lead the way?
Yes, I think 2 points. Or 3. Let me start with the fact that the way an innovation lab, I call it, is organized has really helped to strengthen collaboration between the local researchers and the mentors. For us, we have enjoyed working with the mentor. We have the capacity to do the local research. As you say, we understand the context. We perhaps a better place to think about the solutions, but we also benefit from the skills and expertise of working with mentors. So I think that arrangement is good, and I think innovation labs they help to build that capacity. We don't have all the capacity in the south, perhaps. In some cases, we still need support from the north. But I think also as we think about how to organize the innovation labs and what support to give to the local institutions, this can also be treated on a case-by-case basis. Because we are all very different. Some institutions have very good systems, have even a grant office, others don't have. And I think the example David explained about how the all-in grant is organized. There are those institutions that can receive grants and run on their own and report, others need direct support from ICE. So I think the fact that they start learning, peer learning is another issue. Peer learning between researchers, north and south, but also south. I think there's that opportunity of learning. I think that is a big plus on innovation labs. But I also think the third point is that these labs have focused thematic areas. So we are able to build capacity of researchers, maybe all in terms of impact evaluation. So they start focus in the thematic area. PRCI has been on capacity building. I think there's a lot of things that Yes,
yes,
AI
AI
has
has
impacted
impacted
on
on
centers and researchers within the centers in terms of capacity building. Some of that is going to last long. We have the trainings that have been done, the materials available on the website, and they can be reached. I mean, more researchers can access those materials. So I think that focus in terms of the thematic area is a good way to help develop capacity, even create, say what, community of practice. And also, I think allow the local institutions to develop leadership in those specific areas. And then from that, I think then we can have more collaboration. For example, institutions that are in the horticulture innovation lab, working with those that are in all-in, working on impact evaluation. I think
I think
that's
cross-learning and peer learning
through the
through the
Innovation
Innovation
Labs
Labs
platforms will help to deepen the capacity that we are interested in terms of local research and development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Saskia. I'm going to pass to you.
My notes are very similar to what
Lillian
already
said.
said.
I think
I think we have as Innovation Lab, and it can always be better and longer, but we are lucky to be not second phase. Lillian mentioned they have been working over 20 years with USA. So that is something that that there is a commitment, there is a willingness, and there may be some gaps and so on, but we are in this for the long run, and we really we want to work together. So I think that's really what, and it's not only we understand that researchers alone that there needs to be an enabling environment, that all of us are working hard with that, and we don't have I don't think we have there's no one solution. It's very contextualized, but I think we are making progress. So I want to leave it and hand it over to Dr.
Thank you, Saskia. Toby.
I think the innovation labs now is innovation. For this call, first of all, they are in local in the country that you have the culture, the motivations, even if they are funded very different levels, and yet the same. I feel like that's a really nice starting point for development. You're a university, you work with a virtual research institution, you already have commitment. Your metrics are always the same. These are your tasks. Really easy to start. The second part, when I think about leadership, I take one piece of it, research. What does it take to be research? The things that you need to be a research success person in the US are the same thing that you need. You need mentorship. You need someone to hold your hand, someone to connect you with your networks. And I feel innovation labs can actually provide that. That even though you funded for 5, 10 years, that what you do, like getting a research visa, obviously go beyond 5, 10 years. My final comment is maybe there's something about time that we need to think about. How much time do we need to say we have minutes? And I propose that it's not 1 or 2. This is a long haul. The idea of getting research with the idea of creating capacity is long-term investment. My last comment is, I know you asked a question like what are other funders doing. My first research fellowship that I got was from Work and Trust. Okay. Was that we fellowship. As soon as I set up, I started thinking, okay, things is coming to an end. 3 years leadership maybe 5 years, maybe short. And I have seen that because they were really interested in building like research leadership, they have moved the career development fellowship from 3 years to 8 years. So if I apply it, I get 8 years. That's a huge correlation that you do need an amount of time develop some that can be let go.
Thank you so much to all of you. And I think this leaves us on a high note. I hear very powerful messages. I think the power of education. I think many of us, myself, I'm a first generation person, scholar going to a university, getting a PhD. So it is very powerful and impactful, and it has like a very positive ripple effect. The idea of cross-learning, peer learning, building communities of practices really is potentially breaking that those south-south, north-south communication and maybe hierarchical ways of learning. So that concept of community of practices is very powerful, and the innovation labs have that capacity. In our own innovation lab, our activities include U.S. institutions and local institutions. And I think from your presentation, David, this morning, that idea that it just really builds from helping them to develop strategic learning, strategic planning, but from that whole learning process, I think that is very important. And that's why I think the innovation labs are very well positioned to do this work. And to think that this is a long-term work. It's not, and it includes collaborations, partnerships, and that we are in this together. So with that, I'm just going to leave that and thank our panelists. Thank you so much for your contributions, and for the public. And Erin, she was taking notes, so thank you so much for that. This is going to be very helpful for everybody just to continue learning on that. So.
Okay, great. So we are planning on transitioning now into our breakout groups, but I think there's been a request to do some overall plenary questions. Is that right, David? Okay. So let me just open up the floor for just one or two plenary questions before we go into our breakout sessions. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think I might pause.
I knew it.
As well, at least I'm not doing No, I wanted to just make a few more observations. We had a lot of folks, but there's also kind of the research side of this that I think is really important. So I just wanted to call attention a couple things that would give a lot of David.
We can hear you.
You cannot hear me? Okay. So I wanted just to call attention to a couple of things that we did as part of the process of soliciting grants. So one was mentorship, and that's sort of normal, and I think we kind of understand that. But it also ties into the basic innovation line. So when we needed mentors, right, I spent a lot of time twisting arms with people who had a lot of research experience. And said, remember that money we gave you a couple of years ago? Time to pay it. So it's actually integrated. That's part of what makes the labs maybe a way to do this. But a little bit more importantly, David mentioned the number of expressions of interest and final proposals that we got. Some were very good, and actually some were very bad. And they were bad not because there wasn't a good idea, but it was through the person that never actually did a research proposal. And we held, we reviewed all the proposals exactly the way we do any research proposal, external reviewers and all this. And David had the brilliant idea. It said in this context, usually when you get your proposal is not accepted, you feel terrible, and you go in the room, you cry a little bit, and start over. David said, why don't we have some meetings with people who lost? We didn't call them losers. We came up with something nicer. The notion was this is the beginning. Okay. So we
actually
actually
put
put
together
two
two
conferences,
conferences,
one in East
East
Africa, one in
Africa,
West
one in West
Africa,
Africa.
and we
And we invited
the
the
people,
people, the roughly
like
like
80
80
people
people
who
who
did
did
proposals
proposals
we
we
rejected.
rejected.
We
We invited them and said,
come
bring your proposal. We're going to have a 3-day workshop
on how
on how to write research proposals and what makes it good.
And
initially in these meetings, I was at
and other people. There
there was a little tension.
The
The
people
were unhappy.
right? They
They worked really hard on this.
and
How dare you tell me I'm no good, right? Of course, we tried to say, well,
can't all
be good because
there's so much money.
money.
But then
we really went through what makes a good research proposal, really good examples, people from working groups looking at proposals
more critically.
critically.
And
And after those sessions, I had multiple people come up to me and say,
I was
angry when I got here.
I
thought my proposal was the greatest.
But now
I realize the proposal was really pretty poor. Right?
And
I certainly never had that as a young researcher, someone really walked me through and said, well, that.
And I think
this was a really valuable thing that David suggested. And I just want to mention that,
when
we're looking at the reality, especially in my discipline of economics, a lot of people have been part of proposals, but they've never really had to do the proposal themselves. And I think this was really valuable kind of feedback.
So I just
wanted to mention that as a slightly unusual thing that we did, but in the end, I think it made a lot of sense. And we've now rolled that into all the research networks and saying, okay, we're not forgetting about you. Let's start sort of keep
a momentum. Excuse me,
keep the momentum.
Keep people working together. Anyway,
sorry for interrupting, but I wanted to get that side of how the research was actually sort of done.
Yeah,
thank you, Michael. Jen, you have a comment, and
while I'm giving Jen the mic, I'll just say that
idea was contagious. We like to replicate good ideas, and now we are doing the same thing at the Innovation Lab.
So the
So
140 proposals that we got,
of course,
funded a
few,
few, and we're starting
up the same network.
And Sophie and David have been extremely helpful in guiding the way for us.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a fabulous idea. And I think that kind of capacity building on grant writing, and then we were also talking about communication, how we could build, help scientists or other young scholars really do a really crisp job of their communication efforts as well. And there's lots of capacity building. But actually, I don't. That's just related to that. But I have it's more of a question because I think the dialogue this morning was really helpful and great points. Kibani was talking about the burden for local universities and their responsibilities of teaching and research. I don't think that's entirely unrelated to what happens in the U.S. universities as well. But I think a big challenge that we have is, and then I'd love to hear from, not necessarily, maybe in our breakout sessions, but just posing the question, if we develop, because what we run into is you use funding to develop positions, which honestly we can't do, but for research positions as opposed to teaching, then how is that sustained? How after the funding is over, how do you, that's at the local level, that's kind of the challenge. What's my job afterwards? And obviously their livelihoods are really important. So thinking about the institutional structure for sustainability beyond the livelihood of grant is a question, and that relates to research and also these, I do think building not providing, but funding for infrastructure to implement grants is huge. But who funds that? When you're talking to scientists, they're not going to want to use their research money to fund infrastructure or evaluation or communication or gender. It's getting better, but those are some really core things that make these projects work, and it's difficult to get it out of the funding. So that's just
I think let me come in here. When I was in MCC, the Corporation, we gave a grant to ISE, that's not Ghana, for their first, that was the first impact evaluation by any Africa institution. And as a result of that, the overhead that we got from us, the grant was about $2 million. They were able to really build infrastructure systems
and when I moved to Accra, we gave them about 4 impact evaluation funding. And they have used it to really build a post-millennial hotel, and we were talking about it. And when you go to Invest of Ghana, we were there, the conference school that we were, where as a result of the MCC funding, that we gave them to do impact. So if you go and see, fortunately I'm an adjunct professor there, no, I've supported them for so many years. But if you go there and see the different funding that they have been able to diversify and grow the institution, and most of you are working with ESA, University of Ghana. It has become a self-sustaining research institution. So when you start something like that, and you get the right leadership to work with, it grows out proportionately. When Madagascar started ESA with eyes, we have people who are monitoring grants. We have accountants, and we have diversified. Currently, we are running a foundation project. We are running UN foundation projects. We are working with Horticulture Innovation Lab, and it builds the capacity. So when you start something and you have a long-term vision, it always so it's not only the money, but the vision to carry it forward. That is what is more.
I just wanted to add that in addition to the problems that most countries researchers are having in terms of applying for grants, this is really even a problem in the US where we got a NOFO, say, for a new innovation lab, and we get many applications, but a lot of them are very poor because they don't understand fully USAID's requirements. And the big land grants are machines that can easily put together these proposals, but even those often fail because our requirements are very detailed. And it's something that we're beginning to work on, but I do think it's a problem. And for example, like the historically black colleges and universities,
you need more into the.
Sorry. So for the HBCUs, we would like them to get more money from us for leading these innovation labs. And they haven't been able to do this because of the requirements and the hoops that they have to jump. And it's a shame because I think that they have partnerships with researchers, other institutions in Africa that maybe we don't partner with. And it's something that we are taking advantage of. Thanks.
It works.
Can everybody hear me?
So
I'm Randy Woodlawn, Associate Director of the Safety Innovation Lab.
To address the historically, to address the MSI issue, we actually took the onus on ourselves, and we contracted with Rutgers to identify all the different institutions that had programs that matched our food safety, and we built out a listserv. I forgot. Pardon? It was several hundred emails, and we didn't only send it out one time, we sent it out multiple times. Then we identified specific people at each of those different institutions. And we went from dean level and then at the department level to really beat pushes to make sure that we were trying to get as many MSIs applying as possible. And it was actually quite successful. In our second RFA, we've had very good projects and really good collaborators at those MSIs, which we would have never been able to have established that collaboration if we didn't really do the legwork to identify potential collaborators.
If I may, yeah. So all of us labs have a mandate for human and institutional capacity development. I think we've become quite adept at the human part of it. But very few of us devote time to the institutional capacity development. And I understand the reluctance because it's like going into someone's house and giving them tips on how to clean. They're not going to appreciate it very much. How this gets approached becomes a very important issue, and having the willingness to allow the institutions to somehow as a
to them over time, or broadening, casting the net wide to capture individual talent potential across the board. Because if you are only working with Tegemeo, then only Tegemeo affiliated people are in. But if you cast the net wide, then all of a sudden, Maseno University all the way to the west, like Kipe University, and some small center in Busia, there's a good millet breeder over there coming up. Could you work with them as well? Just as opposed to just working with the economists, the great economists at Tegemeo. And then Michael had a really good point that, say, in the social sciences, the fixed costs of setup are not as severe as in the other, say, lab-based sciences. So in that case, you could start very quickly with a wider talent search because you don't really need expensive labs. But in the other sciences, maybe the more institutional approach is appropriate because you want a home to contain the fancy labs and yeah, I'm exaggerating here, but you get what I mean. That you start with capital investments if you're in the other sciences, and then you broaden to talent search. In the social sciences, economics, etc., you could start with a broader talent search because the fixed costs of setup are lower. And then exactly. Yeah, no, correct. Yeah. Structures to draw from a broader pool of talent. Yeah, exactly. And then to finish is when evaluating research proposals, look at boundary pushing ideas, not ideas that sound like they're conforming to the RFPs too much. And that researchers tend to be tempted, naturally you could think, to show how they are in line with the RFP, when actually, Michael was warning us, what is actually needed is who is really saying something that's out there, that's boundary pushing, almost contradicting the RFP. I don't know how successful that is, you tell me, but I think that's a really good model to have. And then finally resolve the balance between, and Tyrell was asking us how we resolve that, the global and local public goods. So, and we thought, this is me now abusing my position here. I thought the US universities and the innovation labs sit at a place where they can drive the global public goods, then capacitate local actors to provide the local public goods. So that's how we were going around it. I hope you picked one or two things. I think you sanitized it. You and David sanitized our discussion quite a bit. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, are we closing the discussion, or one of our members here might want to? We should move on, okay.
I don't know if you can try to use two. They could give a better outcome. So we answered the two questions that we want to promote. And here we're looking at defining priorities, which are locally related. And then two was promoting ownership. And when we are talking, you remember one of our colleagues was like, sometimes when we go to universities, we work with individuals. And therefore we start building individuals other than institutions. So here we are looking at promoting ownership from the local university, policy-making levels, and generally looking at the bigger picture of the whole local entity. Then three, we also thought about we need to break silos. Quite a number of times, each of us wants to work alone, and yet we should be driving an agenda that is defining the whole goal of the Feed the Future strategy. And in this, we need to strategize for adoption and scaling. We need to link our innovation labs to each other and local institutions. And We also need to share resources and tools that we have, definitely leveraging over the little resources that are in the process. Then there was an issue of equality. And when we are talking about equality, we are looking at issues of opportunities and leadership, other than defining equality in terms of gender or the marginalized. But even when we are looking at gender and the marginalized, how are we promoting the issues of opportunity and leadership in the whole ecosystem? Then the issue of what we don't want to promote, we shouldn't come with premeditated ideas and we think that's what we should do. There should be an issue of co-creation. Then the issue of inflexibility, dependency, and one of the major things we talked about that we shouldn't absolutely promote is the spirit of feeling that you are a big brother in this whole ecosystem. Issues of monopoly and negative competition. I knew quite a number of times in our contractual frameworks, we have to go by our different indicators, but definitely we need to look at how we merge these indicators still to answer the same goal that we are striving to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent additions. Really, really great. So do we have a team over here that would like to present? Lusike.
Thank you very much. I was trying not to present. So since I've been given, I'm going to actually try to present what the group discussed on the issues of promoting local-led research. And one of the areas that we first began to discuss is, what do we want to promote? What is it that we're trying to promote here? And then one of the things that came up was to shorten the time to delivery of funds to these institutions. At times it takes too long. You write a proposal or a concept and then it can take long. For CalRO, at times it takes up to 8 years to get the funding. By that time, even you've forgotten what you wrote. So how do we shorten this time? Why would it take 10 years? There's one we're waiting now 5 years. And we're hoping maybe in 3 years' time, maybe before I retire, the funding comes. Or there's a generation there that even knows what was written. So, but these other ones, the Innovation Lab ones are different, they are faster, but how do we shorten that time? And then the issue of, to be able to do this is we need to improve the internal evaluation. We're used to working on a quarterly basis. So when it comes to research, the research is evaluated on a quarterly basis through reports and all of that. But there are components of that evaluation that don't happen quarterly. And like for the projects that CalRO implements, some of these things are done at the end of the project, and they can take up to 8 to 10 years for you to be cleared to get another level of funding. So how Tagamewa has been funded for 20 years up to now, I don't know. So how do we shorten so that as we're evaluating the research, we're also evaluating the financial processes, administrative, and everything on a quarterly basis so that when a project ends, it just takes 1 year to clear. Then the other thing is, how can we be more sensitive to local content, context? How can we be more sensitive so that when projects are coming in, they're linking with the development agenda of those particular countries or even strategic plans for the various institutions so that we're not throwing it too off. This is not so bad. Usually it's quite good, but can we be a lot more sensitive so that maybe before you engage, you ask, where's your strategic plan, where the government's developmental policy, so that we're making sure that what we're going to implement actually is what the government wants. And a lot of these institutions now are becoming more sensitive to that, and it will really be good for USA to also conform to that so that we're able to do this. And to be able to succeed even better is we need to understand the institutional capacity. Not all of us are at the same level. It has been presented today, And then wherever it is, how do you up it? How do you up that game to improve the institutional capacity? It's important. We don't just come in, implement, and leave the institution you've been working with at the same level. How do you then best implement that? Strengthen our institutional capacity. Then the other one, where we're focusing a lot on research, on how to empower the local partners to set the research agenda. You know, not everybody is good at everything. At times we need a little bit of more help in terms of empowering institutions to be able to present and even to be able to develop very good investment and attractive proposals to capture funding to help those institutions or even those countries. Then one of the other things that came out, yes, you get funding for research, but when you look at the infrastructure, the research infrastructure, the laboratories, they might look like, there's a Chinese who came to one of our labs and said it looks like a lab in China in 1960s. It was so insulting, I wanted to punch him. But I said, no, let me be a bit nice. But it was the truth. So how? When we're funding research, when do we leave a fingerprint? For CalRO, USAID has been excellent. There are so many fingerprints. Even the laptop I used yesterday, that's a product from funding from USAID. If I flip it over, you will see the sign. Some of you might think I'm cheating. It's right there. I'm going to show you. Here. For the guys who have got good eyes, you see USAID there. So this is not my laptop. It's been supported by funding from the US. So how do we best improve these labs facilities? And we're not saying everybody has to have a gene sequencer, but everybody must have a pH meter. You see where I'm going? How are we able to do this so that at least some level of research is done continuously? And then the more complicated, we see how to leverage on working with other advanced labs to be able to do that research. Like in Kenya, we have Becca, so you can go there and use their gene sequencer. But now what you need to pay for is the bench space and the time that you spend in Becca. Those are the kind of things that we're talking about. And then we also talked about what kind of model are we talking about? As USAID is implementing research in these countries, and we know that US has been very successful, how do we borrow the land grant model and integrate it into these different regions of the world where USAID is working? It might not be called land grant, but it might mimic what is in the land grant. This thing where research, extension, and academia are actually working together and sit in the same facility. So they don't have to have meetings once a year to meet, but they meet every day in the toilets, when having lunch. They're always meeting and talking. How do we follow and copy that model of the land grant, but now, for example, here in Kenya? It's a fantastic model. I've witnessed it in University of Arkansas and also Rutgers University. So I know it works, and that way to be able to empower extension, because the extension is extremely weak. And so how do we then now use this model of the land grant? When we're implementing research, we're ensuring that those products are actually going to the end users. And that is done by extension, whether it's private sector extension, whether it's farmer-led extension, whether it's research-led extension. How do we ensure it gets everywhere? Now we're really promoting the use of mobile phones for extension of research products. So how do we do this? Because like for CalRO, we don't have a lot of money, but our information, if you get to Google Play Store and type CalRO, there are over 90 applications, and that's how we're extending. How can we borrow that kind of model from these projects of the USA to ensure that maybe there is an application that you just need to tweak a bit, like the one of taking photographs and be able to know that this is the disease. You just tweak a bit, and then you are able to make it even better. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel, but you can make the wheel much more better. So those are some of the things we talked about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susike and her team. I've noted down, I really liked your point about infrastructure. That comes up a lot. So I sanitized it, I suppose, made it equalized scientific infrastructure. I think that's a really good addition, along with your others. We have one last group, is this right? All right.
All right, so in our group, we identified 3 or 4 things that we wanted to encourage. First is to engage the local leadership from the get-go, from the conception of the program that you're trying to implement. That will just bring everybody in, so everybody know what they're expected to do, and just spread out accountability. We agreed that number 2, we agreed that we are doing a lot of training and research and documentation, and just engaging the student in writing reports and stuff. But we're not doing a really good job in training them to do grant writing. So encouraging grant writing at the research level, at the student level, I think that's gonna be that's gonna be beneficial. Number 3 is just encouraging and enhancing the enabling environments. This is where the infrastructure we talked about. This is where we talked about capacity building, institutional capacity building. But on the other side, what we don't want to encourage is to be so focused on results that we forget to include it, to be inclusive, and create this environment where the local partners don't even want to work with us. They just want to be engaged because, yeah, it's a project. I know it's going to be finishing, but we want them to be encouraged enough, engaged enough, so they can actually see a path forward beyond the project. And the time constraint. Limiting the difficulties and the time constraint, that was one of the big things too we talked about. We come in with, sometimes we are constrained with, the donors, with the funders, and we come in with the project and we just literally limited in time. So we really need to get going like right away. Instead of focusing on the capacity building, on identifying good partners, we just work with the same partners that we worked with before, just because we are constrained with this time limit. I think that's all. Did I miss anything?
I think one point that we tried to discuss, and putting it in a positive light, is we don't want to discourage failures. Discourage failure. For some reason, I can't say that word this morning. Because that's the only way we can be innovative if we aren't successful. And so I think we don't want to get into a situation where we are so pressured to have positive results that we forget that we want to be able to be a little bit more innovative, whether it's from contractual work or administration or handling funding or doing research.
Yeah, one more. We also discussed the potential conflict between kind of the product life cycle, stage gate, go, no-go decision, and how that could impact the long-term relationship with the local institutions. If we're terminating or deobligating a project or funding, and that could also impact the long-term capacity development plans.
Yeah, one of the things we also discussed was we said the local partners should be responsible for management, monitoring and evaluation, and then also learning the lessons from it, and be flexible enough for them to relook at strategy, methodology, or whatever they are doing so that they can renew it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to our last group. You brought up some really good points. One thing I added to your encourage grant writing, which I don't think I heard from many groups, or maybe I missed it, but that as we encourage grant writing and support capacity to manage finances, that we somehow are also providing funding in some way. So if we are going big, I would say that it's important to provide consistent funding streams in order for these new local leaders to lead projects. So with that, thank you all so much for this vision. We're going to.
Can I add one thing about the funding? We've talked about consistent funding, but I think we are discussing here, we felt like core funding for research institutions is critical, because when that funding is available, then the researchers are able to focus. I think there was a question about book writing, following every consultancy that's coming up. Are we able to focus? I think that core funding is important. No, oh, okay, yes. Core, okay. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I wasn't checking what you're writing. But maybe one more addition. We've talked about supporting the local institutions, and it's important. But I think for the innovation labs, maybe in the next round of proposals, something we could explore is requiring that the funding goes to a consortium of local institutions, not just one, so that we can bring in different expertise, allow for cross-center learning, and bring a lot of expertise together. The sorghum breeders and the economists could work together on something. Thank you.
So excellent. We have 20 more minutes together. We've talked about this vision, which I think there's a lot of overlap, and we'll get to sort of our follow-up after our next breakout. But we will synthesize all of this. There's been, I think, some themes that have emerged, and we'll be able to send it out to you all for your feedback. Now, however, I want us to turn to our immediate next steps. So this last panel is meant to be on, I think, the next immediate things that USAID can do to encourage this vision, the next immediate steps that the ILs can do, and the next immediate steps that the local partners can do. So that's a lot in the next 10 minutes. So if your team can please focus on how should I do this actually? Would you all be amenable to 2 tables focusing on one group? So like these 2 tables can focus on USAID, these 2 tables can focus on IL partnership, and these 2 tables can focus on local partners' immediate next steps. Does that make sense? Would everyone be okay with that? Okay, great. Just so you don't have to spread yourselves too thin, because we have 10 minutes to do this. So in your groups, you have 10 minutes. Please provide 3 immediate next steps that your stakeholder can do to start operationalizing this vision. So these 2 tables are going to focus on USAID. These 2 tables will focus on innovation labs, and these 2 tables will focus on local partners. And then we'll share out, and of course you can provide feedback on one another. I'm sure people will have opinions on all 3. Thanks. Closed down conversation. Okay, please write down your final thoughts. If you can raise your hand when your table is ready. All right, we have our first one over here. Thank you. Over here, are you all ready? Best table. Oh, Tyrell, sorry, you're talking, you're good? Okay. And we got USAID over here, all right? Okay, excellent. So let's work our way. You all want to start? Let's work our way. Let's start with the local partners. go to the ILs, and then we'll end with USAID.
Thank you. Okay. So we have I believe we have a pretty nice list here. We were asked to identify some next steps for local organizations. So I'll start with the first one. Consider conducting a organizational capacity assessment of themselves to identify those strengths, those things, areas that they need to improve, and even around strengths, kind of what they can offer to a potential partnership, which can help those scientists properly partner, as well as identify what actual capacity strengthening needs they need to help them communicate those things out to their partners. Conducted inventory of expertise. Again, going back towards kind of what strengths are offered and what that organization can offer in the way of expertise, as well as research goals for that institution. Again, to help identify alignment. So alignment on when, let's say, a NOFO or a funded opportunity comes, if we know what our research goals are, it may help to basically communicate that out or disseminate that opportunity to the individual within that institution to potentially apply if we know what our research goals are and our expertise are and how we properly align with a funding opportunity. The next one, develop a roadmap that between research and extension that shows how research products are generated and then disseminated to next users and end users. So again, to help with alignment between different components of an organization. Establish a NICRA. I think we all know what those are, hopefully. Then we had an interesting point on leadership buy-in that a lot of times, and that was talked about on the panel also, that leadership buy-in is so important. And one of the ways that was illustration that was brought out is here, the mission engaged the leadership of a particular academic organization. And that in turn helped support those identifying those processes and strengthening those administrative processes to help conduct the research and help that organization properly align with those mission priorities and support and partner with other organizations working within the local ecosystem, if I'm saying that correctly. The next one, increase participation in USAID partner convenings and partner meetings. And this is again for organizations to not only know kind of what are the priorities for USAID, other stakeholders, but also help set up, kind of dip into that networks, which then increases the opportunities and chances of partnering with others and contributing to other initiatives that may be going on. Identify an organizational point of contact. I thought of the idea where in DC, you have universities that have kind of a government relations board where they have, even though university is based somewhere else, they have an office there in DC that kind of helps facilitate relationships between government offices and their organization back home. And this organizational POC can be for USAID, other donors, other stakeholders in the community or internationally, as well as for the local government. The next one, understand organizational risk and accountability. Basically, when we're dealing with a failure or some type of issue, whether it be administrative or the like, who's actually responsible for that issue? Does the individual scientist pay because there's something administratively going on that is not allowing them to meet their needs to properly perform that particular award requirements? or is it within the contracting office, or whoever else is handling those administrative issues? So who's responsible for an issue, and how do we work through getting those things resolved? And the last one is around establishing a strategy and the support mechanisms to do policy and community engagement. One thing that can be done in that space is to help build individual scientists, their communication skills and advocacy skills. If there's a particular issue that they want to work on, one thing that was mentioned was around index-based livestock insurance, where it was a relatively new idea. You have to bring multiple organizations have to be involved, whether that's government and the like, to support it. Who actually goes around and kind of coordinates and gets everyone on the same page to ensure that that particular technology or innovation is properly adopted and the enabling environment is there for that to scale. I think that's it. Is there anything that I missed or misrepresented?
One thing on the extension sort of roadmap, it's as much a roadmap for cooperation among the different delivery units of extension, because it is not always cooperative, at least in my experience, the way that we would see it in the land grant system. And so having an idea about how we're going to have a ministry and a university and other extension delivery arms cooperating to put a message out, I think would be helpful.
Okay then, the danger of being note taker. I think we have 4 main points. Sarah shared, and I think this applies to several of the Innovation Lab, is the reduce channeling funds through CG to then work with NARS towards, moving more directly funding NARS. Also, again, thinking of our own institutions, modified tenure track. So that would really incentivize young tenure track faculty to get involved in this type of research. Now they are so focused on to get the publications, to meet the requirements, that maybe if they're still motivated, we are 10 years further. So we really would like to work, there are great benefits. So really working with university systems to discuss this and to have, and Serge was again giving the example from Penn State, where there's actually tenure track is now considering, the impact your research or your work has on society. So that is I thought was very neat. And then Michael mentioned, be much more proactive with our upper administration about the relevance of having an innovation lab, and the highlight the global reputation and the impacts of publications and so on, to maybe overcome some of the barriers when applying for new, but also receiving the support. So we did a quick round here to understand who has actually, which management entity or members from management entities are funded by core funding from the university or state funds or whatever is applicable versus fully project funded. So that also differs a lot. So that would also help. And then in terms of, set the priority setting in country, I think many of us, we get the award and then we really are very keen on getting a first RFA out, and we have done some scoping exercises, but I think that needs to be, I really enjoyed, Aaron, what you presented today. You really took the time and did a lot of work before then issuing an RFA, and yeah, thinking about a future for us, I think we need to do better on that. Of course, that reduces the actual project time, so that there is the downsides perhaps of that, but I think we need to do a better job of that. Any other comments from you?
All right. So we kind of thought of things a little bit more broader when it came to building global capacity, starting immediate actions for the innovation labs. A lot of the examples that we you all just mentioned kind of fit into some of our next steps. But first step, knowing that it is going to be a little bit different about immediate next steps for each individual innovation lab. So really, like researchers, it all begins with that assessment, and both internally, figuring out, all right, how are we dealing with time zones? Are we including considerations such as, language barriers with our in-country partners, meeting at convenient times for them, but also thinking external assessments, asking directly our collaborating partners what their experiences and thoughts are, how we can improve our practices, procedures, and issues. Next step would be, again, prioritizing what those issues are based on, yes, what's most important, but also what is the ease of implementation at this point. And then next step being, all right, sooner, ideally, updating those that are easy changes to make, whether it, again, meeting time is an example of something that we've done more recently with Fizzle. But also, again, those most important, bigger ideas, contracting with our in-country partners rather than having a go-between, for example, that being our next step. And then we have a beautiful model too that kind of shows the relationship between our innovation labs, our collaborating universities and country, but then also our USAID mission, connecting USAID and the collaborating universities. So we do have this intricate relationship and very logical big picture. But like I said, a lot of your examples really kind of would fit into where do we, once we have these, how do we prioritize them and how do we implement next steps?
We had immediate next steps in terms of USAID. So we came up with 3, and one of it is burden busting, maybe allowing the local partners to do procurement, and then also looking at the reporting requirements that we will need. And number 2 will be transitioning SAPs to primes. That is flipping the model. And we're looking at the experiential learning that the SAPs have had over the years, probably not just with one innovation lab, but with several of them that they have had. So that gives them the opportunity to even see through from the beginning. And then the third one we are looking at is looking at stronger engagement between the labs and then the missions. This is very important because most often the relationship is either between the Feed the Future coordinator or the POC for the innovation lab at the mission level. So it does not really let the mission even see the work of the innovation labs. And so we are saying that we need to learn from models that have been done and they are successful. So if we look at the innovation labs that are working across the region, which are some of the models that we can really bring to use. And then we are also looking at research and development. So we are saying that the research, the innovation labs get direct relationship with implementing partners on the ground, so that with the local partners and all the research that has been done, then the implementing partners run with it and scale it up. So the research become more usable within the USAID family, and then they spread it up. And the last one we are looking at is working with the local partners. One of the other partners will be FSNs, because of the institutional memory they have on the mission, and they've seen the projects go and end up. How do they have that relationship and get it going?
that has been so great. Standing here, I've got a chance of walking around all the groups, seeing the visions, the ideas, and now coming up with the next steps, have been so great. Our goal is to put everything together and maybe share it with you, and then get your input before we share it with USAID, so that it can be a roadmap for us to follow. And those from USAID, we are not going to do a coup, No, we want to help you we want to operationalize the vision, the administrated vision of localization. And I think that is one of the best way to be part of it. I was part of the consultative group that participated in, putting those things together. And I think all the people here, collective experience, I think it will be more than 500 years if we put our collective experience together, isn't it? About 500 years. 500 years experience, sharing that experiences with you, I think is going to really, really sharpen that vision of localization. We want to be involved. We want to be part of it. And I think with Innovation Lab, from land grant to Innovation Lab to all these things, years of experience, I think it will really improve the way we work. So we thank you very much. And I don't know whether anybody has a last comment or announcement or anything. Yes. That will be good, and your feedback will really help us to polish the paper so that it will be our products. One of the things I always say is that the poor do not lack brains, they lack opportunities. My thinking is that localization is giving the poor people the opportunity to contribute to global development. And I think with that one, is the lunch ready? I think it's time to go for lunch. Thank you.
Yes,